And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Sorry to keep you waiting. I had to get a fire started. I may have to tend to the fire as we go a little further. Let me know how the audio is. There we go. It appears as if the audio is good. Welcome to the show, everyone. We're going to do a live Q&A with all of the fans. We've got Morning Glory in the house. Al Gore is here. Tammy Ratfeld, Deborah Sloan, Sirius Star, Ian Wilson, Steffers J, John Edwards in the house. Marlene Popos. We've also got Robert in the house. Pennsyltucky Survival. The Crag left. Apparently he had to go to bed early. MJ Pierce in the house. JC Warlock. I also see Melody Schramm. I'm even in the chat. Can you imagine that? Gene Feist is in the house. Elon Butterfield. Butter in those biscuits. McGenie X on YouTube in the house. And Silly Wabbit is here, as well as Nashoba. Trucker Dude, Yordi Sands, Hoved Aquatics, and the Heart Soul Healing, as well as Derek Immig, a.k.a. the guy over on Twitter. The Shepherd of Truth over there on Twitter. Regenerative Soil is here. Antonio Bacchetti, Varismi, Stan Grefnell, all the good friends, Deja Vu, and so on. Varisme. All right, I hope I got everyone. Let me go. I'm going to get some of the early questions here. Pineapple Express, Diamond. I noticed that the garden vegetables are not growing as big or as plenty in the previous years. Yes, that is true for almost everyone last year in certain regions of the U.S. Marlene, that was due to drought. We literally had 2 rainfalls, less than 2 inches all summer. So if you don't get natural rainfall, you don't get any growth. Robert says, Diamond, what do you think caused the mammoths to flash freeze? Was it connected to the same thing that caused the Carolina Bays? I think the Carolina Bays was the beginning of the Younger Dryas event 12,800 years ago. The mammoths, none of them were frozen at that time. So the mammoths we have were frozen 41,000 years ago, 39,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, 21,500 years ago. So these animals, let me share the screen here. And let's get to it. Yeah, we have it here. It's coming. I think I might have erased it. All right, so we're going to share this with y'all. All those animals were living on Beringia. And if I can actually find the tab. And so Beringia shifted. And so here's the modern coastline of Beringia. And this is the coastline 21,000 years ago. This is all above sea level. So there was no Bering Strait. There was no ice. The ice wasn't here either. So there are thousands of mammoths here for a very long time during the Ice Age. And what happened was sometime around 40,000 years ago, a large comet came into the inner solar system and started affecting the sun and breaking up, and pieces started hitting the earth. And if we're using the torrid stream, there is a 3,000-year periodicity to the main center of the stream. And that would be Comet Enki. So we would be encountering this every 3,000 years as it broke up, get into the major sections. So we'd be pummeled every 3,000 years. So there would be major impacts happening up in Beringia or in the Arctic, causing this massive sloshing and floods and debris and then flash freezing of these animals. And this would be regular and periodic and episodic. Very similar to how we're finding the mammoths today. 41,000, 39,000, 30,000, 22,000. There's a bunch of mammoths, at least, I think over 11, maybe 12 now, all been dated between 50 and 20,000 years old. So they're not all coming from the same event. And they don't have buttercups in their mouth. And that whole narrative is complete garbage. But I do digress. All right. Great question, Robert. Hope that answered it. So there may be some flash frozen mammoths from the Younger Dryas event, the event 12,800 years ago that caused the Carolina Bays, which is the major impact on the Laurentide ice sheet, spraying debris, ice bolides all across North America, creating these depressions. All the while, there's a 9 magnitude earthquake causing liquefaction. There's tsunamis washing back and forth the ocean. There are lots of muck deposits in eastern North America, from the Carolinas up through Maine, with ice age debris from 12,800 years ago where mammoths were feeding. And they literally were covered in muck and preserved standing upright. Some of them with their legs broken. So that would be violent events 12,800 years ago, preserving those mammoths. So there's lots of different types of things being preserved during the Ice Age. And all the mammoths that we look at today that are being found are all different ages. 170 in the house, 3 thumbs up. Please smash that thumbs up. So that's what I think caused the mammoths to freeze up there in the Arctic. MJ Pierce got it. Cold temperatures after being buried. That's Occam's razor there, MJ. JC Warlock says possible low sunlight from ash particulates in the atmosphere. How would it get if half the planet was shrouded? And how quick? This question has zero merit, JC Warlock, because you just said ash particulates. How many? How much? From where? So that question is unanswerable. I asked that to Google, and one result was ash from Tonga reaches record altitude, but climate cooling unlikely. Well, Hunga Tonga was a very high eruption. In fact, double the height they initially thought it was, but there was very little ash. It is not even equivalent to Pinatubo, but this was a phreomagmatic super Surtsian eruption. They needed a new name for the type of eruption. And so there was very little ash from Hunga Tonga. All right, I'm going to just keep scrolling down there. In the development of any new systems, the very first is the installation of an off mechanism before anything else is designed. AI skips that step. No idea what you just wrote there. All right, looking for questions, scrolling down here. Al Gore's got no rhythm. Can't jump either. Cardinal Nature says, howdy. Audio's good. Everybody made it. I see Angie, Lincoln Dasher's in the house. C. Hunsinger, Deja Vu. Welcome to the show. 203 in the house. 3 thumbs ups. I guess there could be more. Angus from Wyoming is here. We love you, Angus. Heart and Soul Healing. Okay, look for questions. Question. Does geological dating primarily rely on stratigraphy? That's one of the key factors. It also relies on an epic amount of microfossil data. The key to stratigraphy is tiny microfossils in the forms of diatoms and other microfossils that are easily datable in ocean sediments. So you want to have the most datable sediments. Depending on the dating, the type of dating you're using, you're going to be using the best type of dating for those sediments. But you're usually going to be using microfossils because they're very specific to time frames. You're going to cross-check that with stratigraphy, and then you're going to use multiple dating methods. So that is how we do it when we use geologic dating. So the fact that some people think that geologic dating could be so off that the entire stack in the Grand Canyon is off by a factor of 10 or something, and that the Precambrian is really not a billion years old, is kind of stupid because the stratigraphy speaks for itself. There's almost 50 miles thick of sediment in the last 500 million years just in North America. So it's mind-boggling to think about that. Most of it's missing, but stratigraphers like myself and thousands of others over the last 100 years have pieced it together, and there's a huge stack of sediments in the United States. Okay, looking for some good questions. Have you tried having Mario build reps on your channel? Yes, we have several. We've been interviewing Mario since the inception. So clearly you're new, and all you have to do is go look back into the catalog or put Mario build reps in and take a look at all of our interviews with Mario. Oh, Amelia Porcella. Thank you for the super chat. We appreciate it. That's a boom. Definitely for Amelia. I can't grab here, Amelia. So that's the best I can do for you. Silly Wabbit says, great, awesome show the other night on the misinformation of global warming. Thank you, Silly Wabbit. Tricks it for kids. Now that November was the solar cycle peak, I think major earthquakes, volcanoes will be popping by 2027. Yeah, that would be solar minimum, the drop down. That's when we're expecting large earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. You are correct. Apparently, you've been watching the show. What happened to the guy on Rocky Mountains? See, that's the problem with questions and answer sessions. No one has any idea what that question means. At Regenerative Soil, Mario has been on with Diamond multiple times. I recommend that you check the playlist. Yes, she is a well-informed listener. We love you, Sandy, for it. Thank you for the excellent follow-up there. All right, who's planting seeds? I'm waiting patiently. Derek says, no buttercups. Do a dab. Yes, do a fat dab. Mudfoot, happy birthday, Elon. Cheers. Happy birthday. Any chances of Simon and Pathetic on again, talking tychos? Yes. I'm getting, I think, an updated version of their textbook. It should be coming out this week. We're going to line that up. I did a whole expose with the whole team 2 years ago, and it was so bizarre. They're funded, I guess, by billionaires or something, and they didn't want me to publish it. It wasn't ready, or so, you know, I don't, these people that have issues like that have other issues. So something to be said about that. All right. Derek MX says, can you give us an update on Solar Max in Solar Cycle 25? Is mainstream science starting to open their eyes to how inactive the sun is? Well, probably not. Nobody cares. Let's go over here to, oh man, it's like I've got all these tabs open for you to share, and I can't find a single one. All right, so let's go over to Solon. I'm going to take you to solon.info. If you go to solon.info, you'll get a tab here that says Solar Terrestrial Report. Click on it, and then scroll down. You'll be able to look at all of the latest updates on our sun. So first, we'll look at the comparison of the last 5 solar cycles. And you can see solar cycle 24 here is one of the lowest in over 200 years. Solar cycle 25 is about the same amplitude. So all the forecasts of it being the strongest solar cycle ever were off by a factor of 2 or more, which is typical. The last solar cycle, 99% of all solar scientists got it wrong, and only Valentina Zarkova got it right with the double spike and the low amplitude. So if you're putting your hens in a basket, you should stick with Valentina Zarkova. Now, I don't think any of the mainstream, anybody cares about anything to do with grand solar minimum, fear-mongering, or saying we're all going to starve to death. They're not allowed to say that, so they'll never say that. The mainstream media will never tell you what's actually happening. They only report on the propaganda talking points that come down from up above. So that's what they talk about. They don't talk about real news, which is why channels like Oppenheimer Ranch Project exist. Tony Heller and many others in the paleoclimatology and climatology realms. That's why we're here, because we're sick and tired of being sick and tired of the propaganda and the lies and the manipulation. So that's the best answer I can give you there, bro. So is there a good site for historic earthquake data for the Puget Sound area? Yeah, just type into the bar above your head in the computer, historic earthquake data for the Puget Sound area. It's mind-blowing. You're going to get that information. Where can I find sacred geography video you used to have about the ruler and the compass? Well, that channel's been taken down and it is not up there anymore. I have published the code, I believe, over on Rumble. I'll double check that. And if I haven't, I'll put the code up on Rumble for you for your perusal. Our Rumble channel. Anyone out there, please find our Rumble channel and put the link in the description box. All right, I'm trying to scroll through the chat here as fast as possible. Paratrooper 82 says, what do you think is more likely to destroy our grid in light of recent events, solar flare or EMP? Well, that's a stupid question, Paratrooper. With the acceleration of the globalists into World War III, it is definitely EMP over solar flare. EMPs will be more efficient, will do the job that they're planned to do, and they will take out the grid specifically over any country that they deem necessary. Whereas solar flare is potluck. Depending on the size or veracity, even a Carrington event at X20 to X40 would only have partial degradation to the grid. And what I mean by that is it's going to be a multi-day event and it's going to only affect portions of the grid, maybe half of it, maybe a third of it. No one knows. But it certainly wouldn't fry everything on Earth unless it was a very large event, maybe 2-3 times larger than the Carrington event. So it's hard to know, but I'm leaning on EMP or a purposeful blackout for any reason. Mrs. Hannah says, I'm glad I found you live. We're glad you're here, Miss Hannah. Abel Matthew, could cosmic rays and other solar events have any effect on the accuracy of dating methods used today? Cosmic rays, not so much. Maybe major solar events could have. So everything that is locked in magnetically in rocks is happening. Let's say in a volcanic eruption. At the moment, the lava cools. And it's locked in there. It's very hard to switch the magnetism, so to speak, on a particular rock that's been set magnetically using the magnetic field of Earth. And I think a lot of people are duped and thinking that all of the data is bad because of solar flares or quote unquote micronova, which don't exist, by the way, from our sun anyway. There's no evidence of that. There is evidence of Miyake events. We have huge amounts of evidence of that, yet charlatans like Ben Davidson make up their own word like micronova. They steal it from dead guys named called Doug Vogt. They write textbooks and they dupe millions of dollars out of followers to pay for a campground that they're going to retire on, while the rest of you have your names on plaques in the most dangerous area in North America next to 26 state penitentiaries. So be careful who you listen to and the data that they're portraying. Because dating methods are quite accurate. There's so many of them and there's cross-referencing. They just don't take one date and say that's the time frame. So cosmic rays and other solar events may have an effect on the accuracy of some dating methods, but not all of them, and certainly not everywhere on Earth. And so you can get around it. If you start to get anomalous dates, once you get all the same dates, it's probably that date. I mean, it's that simple. It's not rocket science. But for charlatans, Well, they just make everything up, so it doesn't even matter. It's not even science. Gypsy Rose 8, will the winters be as colder? Will be as colder or colder? Okay. In the future years, and also will summer heat continue for a long time? Well, if you've been with us for a decade, you know in the beginning we did extensive podcasts on what happens during grand solar minimums. You have extreme fluctuations in temperature. You have the coldest colds and the highest highs, causing chaotic weather patterns due to the breakdown of the jet stream, due to a weak magnetic field, increased cosmic rays, and all hell breaks loose. So winters will be colder than normal in some places and hotter than normal in others. And summers will be colder than ever in some places and hotter than ever in others. And that leads to famine, crop loss, and general social unrest. The Heart Soul Healing says, I'm hearing conflicting theories of pending ice age or flood. I'm so confused. You don't need to be confused, Heart Soul Healing. All of these things, including the impending ice age, take longer than your entire lifetime. So I'm sure you're old enough. If you're an adult, you're not going to live more than 3 more decades, are you? Everything's going to be fine. As long as you know how to provide for yourself in the times of a catastrophe. So if the power goes out, will you make it through? It's not like your house is going to be covered in ice. That's not how it works. Whew. Okay. Antonio Bacetti, Diamond, I've noticed that max temps happening later in the day, 4 to 5 p.m. in the past. It was like 2 p.m. What's happening? The high temperature has always been 4 p.m. everywhere, every day, all the time in the middle of the summer. It is never changed. It was never 2 p.m. So I don't know where you got that data. Trucker dude, do you think frequency can cure or cause human behavior and medical conditions? The frequency of what? Trucker dude. Do I think that electromagnetic radiation can cure or cause human behavior? Yes. It's well documented. The full moon effect, the KP0 effect of telepathy and near-death experience, which was hidden by the CIA for decades until it was uncovered by Mudrock and other people with FOIA requests just 5 years ago. Yeah, frequency can cure and cause human behavior. Yes. We know that during geomagnetic storms, there's increase in myocardial infarction, cognitive diminution, and other factors, all by the frequency of the sun. And we also have heard of the Rife machine, many of you, or electromagnetic healing devices, where you simply lie on mats and some electromagnetic frequencies get pumped through your body and you heal up. So all that's true. Angie Lincoln Dasher says, how likely will the Cascadia go off this year? No one can answer that. It's a loaded question, Angie. There is a 100% chance that Cascadia will go off again. It has a periodicity of 250 years. The last time it slipped at that magnitude of 9 was in 1700, January 26 at 9 p.m. So we are well overdue for a large rupture on the Cascadia. How likely will the Cascadia go off this year? Well, it's a very high probability. Hello from Fort Wayne, says Jim Fisher. Can't wait to get back to Colorado. Mr. Mike, question. Could you please summarize Doug Vogt's theory of multidimensional reality? Yes. Excellent question. So we are all well aware of 3 dimensions. Up, down, and in and out, basically. The 3-dimensional universe is pretty much obsolete. And with modern science, we now know that there's probably 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, infinite dimensions. Now, the whole concept of the theory of multidimensional reality is that the main contributor of reality is information, because without information, none of what we have, none of what I say, none of what you're listening to could be real. And yet information has nothing to do with dimension, right? Space, depth, length, width, depth, height. None of that has to do with information. The information is included within the space. So it is the information which Doug, I believe, called the die-hold, that is the key. And his reasoning is simple, that all the information that ever existed exists because it's the universe would be, in that case, infinite. And I think, unfortunately, maybe Doug Vogt was a big banger. Don't quote me on it. But I don't really believe in anything that Doug Vogt said, unfortunately, if that's bad news for you. He was an author that wrote books and liked attention. He claimed that he discovered everything. Like everything in the Bible, he claimed he discovered. These are all red flags when it comes to someone in academia who claims to have discovered everything. You should really use some critical thinking there. He also seemed to be slightly dyslexic. He couldn't even read his own script. And many of the things he said were categorically untrue because he was reading them and read them incorrectly. So he didn't have a good broad-based background knowledge on anything unless he looked at it that day and then read the script that he wrote about it. And most of the brilliant and the good scientists, they don't have scripts. They're using information that comes from their own brain and their own knowledge. So God rest Doug Vogt's soul. He was a great author. He talked many truths. Many of the things he said were true. So he's a great man as far as catastrophism goes. But the earth is not going to end in 2046 in September or whatever date he said. That's complete nonsense. He also said in his early videos that God was going to keep him alive until the event, which clearly isn't the case. So there is that. Okay, look for a couple questions. Bitablaji 3 Inc. Can I get your take on the Great Salt Lake and whether there is actually anything that could be done to keep it from shrinking, or if there's any legitimate reason to try? Well, there is for bleeding heart liberals and environmentalists. They all want to save something when they have no knowledge of long-term cycles or climatic shifts on Earth. Could you imagine all the people 8,000 years ago in the northern Sahara Desert when it was filled with the largest lake on Earth, Lake Chad, and the whole desert was green and the Nile was flowing? If when it started to dry up, they tried to prevent it from drying up, because there's nothing you can do to prevent desertification. You know, you can tax everyone and cut greenhouse gases, but the climate and the sun and the earth are going to do whatever they want to do because people don't have any idea of scale and how much. They just don't get it. They don't get the scale of the entire process. So, and by the way, the Great Salt Lake had record-breaking filling over the last 2 years because of climate change, not human-based, because of natural climate variability. So there's no way that they can claim that the lake is going to dry up or not, but it is probably going to dry up because it's been drying up for thousands of years. Just like glacial Lake Chad has been drying up for thousands of years. At some point, the climate will shift, the rains will fall again on the Giza and in northern Africa, and Lake Chad will rise again. just like Lake Shasta is at maximum now. When 4 years ago, they said it would never fill. It's going to dry up. All the reservoirs in Canada are done. Climate change. It's your fault. It's a 1,000,000-year drought. And in 2 years, 2 record snow years in California, last year and the year before, all of the reservoirs are filled. Lake Mead is up 100 feet. Lake Powell is up 100 feet. All of the things that they said would never happen have happened because they have no idea what they speak of. So you can try to save the Great Lake, but who cares? It's going to either fill or dry regardless of what you do. Now, the freshwater lakes are a different story. The money funders have misappropriated the water from Lake Mead and other lakes for decades for money. And they say it's climate change. They blame you when they very well know exactly how many cubic feet per second flow in, and they appropriate more as it flows out. That means the lake's going to fall. It has nothing to do with climate change. It has to do with greedy land managers and money funders. So, Margot Doyle says, do you give any credence to New Madrid causing European tsunami? The New Madrid cannot cause any tsunami. It is so far inland. Tsunamis are caused by earthquakes that happen under the ocean. That's the only way that they can happen. So there is zero credence to the New Madrid causing a European tsunami. You're welcome. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard, by the way, also. Where did you hear that? The Heart Soul Healing says, how likely are we headed for an impending ice age? I think I answered that. Yeah, you just asked the same thing again. Excellent. Okay. Have you ever interviewed Dean Sessions from the Universal Model? I have no idea what the Universal Model is or who Dean Sessions is. So that would be a double no. JC Warlock says, if there was enough ash in the atmosphere to block out sunlight in the Northern Hemisphere, how cold would it get and how fast? If there was enough ash in the atmosphere to block out all the sunlight, we would all die immediately. It would be minus 100. So that's never happened, and it never will, JC. Apparently, you have a huge disconnect for understanding what's actually going on in the Earth system. Even in the worst year ever to be alive, according to modern history, 536 AD. The sun was still visible. It still got light during the day. So if there was enough ash in the atmosphere to block out the sun completely, the temperature would drop by 100 degrees or more, depending on where you were. And everything would freeze to death. And everything would die rapidly. And so that can never happen, and nor would it ever happen. Because it's never happened. Even with like 600-mile wide comets hitting when ending the dinosaurs, it didn't happen. The sun still comes through in some places. It would be impossible to blacken the entire atmosphere for the entire Earth due to weather systems, because all events are local. Even if it's a 600-mile wide asteroid, it only hits one side of the Earth. And so all that dust can't go everywhere at all the time. It's impossible. While driving through southern Utah, you notice layers in the mountains. Are those layers created on the 12,000 kiloyear cycle, or are they part of bigger cycles? The smallest of the units, which average 1 meter, is about 12,000 years. And a cycle, a 12,000-year cycle, is one of the units. So 2 of them is a great year, a precessional cycle. You have a high stand and a low stand. So when you typically look at an outcrop in the west, you'll see dark light, dark light, dark light, dark light. The dark is a 12,000. The light is a 12,000. The dark is a 12. The light is a 12. And you'll see them packaged up in groups of 5 or 10. That's a 104,000-year cycle, the eccentricity cycle. And so, yes, when you're driving through southern Utah and you notice the layers, each individual layer that's about 1 to 2 feet is 12,000 years. And then there's a deep ocean cycle and a shallow ocean. Deep ocean, shallow ocean. And that is the ice age cycle moving through time immemorial. I studied this all the way back into the Paleozoic, into the Devonian, the Silurian. Same cycle has been happening today, was happening 450 million years ago. Absolutely mind-blowing. The Shepherd of Truth says, is there a connection between changes in Earth's magnetism and changes in climate? Of course, because the magnetism affects the magnetic field. The magnetic field affects the amount of radiation that comes into Earth, and the radiation is directly affecting the weather. So, weaker magnetosphere, more cosmic rays, more clouds, more flooding rains, more cooling. And so that weaker magnetosphere, more lightning storms, and so on. And so it goes. The problem is that modern climatology and climate science doesn't include almost any of these variables in their models. The most important variable that they leave out, Derek, is the sun. In all the modern climate models that claim that we're all burning up, the sun is used as a constant. Yeah, it's not variable. Which is why all climate models are complete shit. How long will you be on yet? Should I pack a fresh bowl? Yes, Rob. That was at 8:30, so that was 23 minutes ago. Here's the quantum vortex in the house. Jimmy, any relationship between the North Atlantic mid-ocean ridge quakes and the ones in Canada over the past 12 months? No, the mid-ocean ridge in the North Atlantic is nowhere near Canada, and those quakes are unrelated. They could be related to Iceland and the eruptions there, however. We have a double diamond lemon diesel in flower. Oh, that sounds amazing. Frank Yanez, if pole is wobbling towards one direction, does ice melt on the other side and create flooding? Frank, you don't know what I really have to say about that question. Will the Earth's crust slip 90 degrees? Absolutely not, Sharon. Anyone who believes that is a complete fool, a charlatan, a fearmonger, a liar, and a grifter, or they work for the CIA. There's no geologic evidence that that has ever happened, let alone every 12,000 years or whatever cockamamie crap they claim. Gorgeous. Awesome is in the house. Magnetic Reversal News. What do you think about the Appeal food additive? It's not a food additive. It's a plastic coating on the product. It's not an additive. They're not adding it to it. They just spray it on. And from everything I saw, it's no worse than the plastic bags, the microplastics, plastic water bottles, and all the plastic that all you plastic gobbler uppers are gobbling up every day. It's no worse or no better. If you actually knew the chemicals they treat the food that you buy, the fresh food in the vegetable section, if you knew what they were doing to that food, you would grow a garden already. It's not food. It's nutrient deficient, even if it's organic. It's kept in containers in anoxic environments for months so that it doesn't age, which is why when you get it in 3 seconds, it rots. And you're like, how did this rot already? Because it's already been sitting for 8 months in an airtight container being sprayed with cyanide dioxide to keep it fresh because it's organic. So Appeal, who gives a, I mean, come on, least of my worries. Yeah, grow your own food. Every year it changes, Jeff. There are so many geneticists out there. There is no way you can say that ever. No way. It changes day to day, week to week, tweak to tweak. A comet passing by Earth being electrically charged. Would the magnetic polarized poles and the electric charge of the Earth have some type of electric pull on a comet, making it more likely to impact Earth? No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Very little. Planetary bodies have very little effect on objects moving 45,000 miles an hour towards their epigee or perigee. It's all physics. You can get slight perturbations, but it's nothing like you think. Now, what the electric fields they pass through can do is cause them to discharge electrically when they go from one environment to the next. But there's no like magnets get clicked together. There's no sucking of anything up like that, because most people don't understand the size and the scale. Like Earth and a comet moving at that speed at the distances, it's equivalent to like a pebble and a piece of dust a million miles apart. I'm like, people just don't get scale. There's very few people on Earth that can understand scale at the size of the universe or even the solar system. It's just too big for most people to understand. And there are certain genetics, there are certain people that are born with the ability to understand scale, and certain people that aren't. Some people know how to use maps. Some people have the ability to move around the Earth in their head, three-dimensionally, visualizing. But it's a limited group. Diamond, have you checked into seed programming, epigenetics, especially for perennials? Yeah, we know all about that. Gorgeous, awesome. I appreciate the channel, Diamond. Thanks for the knowledge. Thank you, Kathy Skidmore. Quantum vortex says Manley Hall talked about it in 1958. I don't know what you're referring to, but he probably did, Jimmy. Arnold Schmid says, Diamond, looking at the North American continent, we see a breaking of land masses in the Arctic. So is the North American plate moving southeast to the Pacific, or are this broken islands moving towards the pole? Well, the islands in question you're looking at are not breaking apart or doing anything to that. That's an erosional pattern due to glaciation and erosion and fjord building. Nothing to do with breaking of anything. The North American continent is on the North American plate, which is bound by the mid-ocean ridge in the Atlantic and the subduction zone on the West Coast. So the plate itself is not broken up into any pieces, Arnold. Sydney Mobley, do you think that the Snake River Basin Yellowstone original bed of eruptions will open up when we have a pole shift? I don't think you understand what a pole shift is, because you said pole shift. Do you mean rotational pole? Do you mean magnetic pole? Do you mean geographic pole? What do you mean? And the geographic pole doesn't shift, nor does the rotational pole. And the magnetic pole shifting has nothing to do with Yellowstone erupting. Yellowstone erupts when enough magma is beneath the caldera to cause an eruption. But you probably watch Mary Greeley or someone else. So there's that. Okay, kind of half expected any large solar activity to happen. Kind of half expected any large solar activity to happen in the ramp off of solar max. Large solar flares happen during solar max. You're correct. Next year? No, well, solar max is over. All of the solar polar fields have reversed last year. So there is maybe a year of more solar flaring, but there's not a second max, like a higher peak, because the solar polar fields have already reversed. So that is not happening, JC. And the mainstream is just catching up to that. But clearly they don't want to tell you too early, because they all said this cycle is going to be the biggest ever. The topics that have gotten our channels taken down is based on the environment the topics are spoken of. We got demonetized for speaking about COVID in the beginning 3 times. And we've got demonetized for other topics throughout the years. So whatever they change the community guidelines to be at that moment is what we get taken down for. It's usually so vague and nefarious that there's no way to really tell what's going on there. Are there any updates to projections of Maunder minimum overlap with accretion of pole shift? Acceleration of pole shift. The Maunder minimum was hundreds of years ago, and it's over. So I have no idea what you're asking. Clearly, you don't have any idea either. Jimmy says cyber attacks long before an EMP. Well, a cyber attack could be an EMP, Jimmy, because that would certainly take down the internet. So you're saying the same thing without saying the same thing. Angie Lincoln Dasher with the bombastic 1999 super sticker. We appreciate you, Angie. Diamond, is Harp a real thing, or is it, or was it ever consequential to the U.S.? Harp is an experimental high altitude planet up in, yes, it's real. They've been really using it. They really do ionospheric testing, and they illuminate the ionosphere, and they can create aurora and stuff, but it's all local. They can't shoot it around the world and create fucking storms or any of the other nonsense that anyone thinks it can do. It is so low powered that an independent group went and did a study years ago to prove that it could not do what everyone says it does. And guess what they proved? That Harp can't do shit. But it's used for experiments in the ionosphere. So it does do that. Okay. Gravitational waves, affect timelines, hit that thumbs up. Diamond, have you and Leah heard of the book Where the Spirits Ride the Wind by Felicitas Goodman? In her work, she discovers trance journeys are depicted in ancient figurines. Never heard of the book, but I could believe it. You know that song by the Smiths, How Soon Is Now? Willie Soon Is Now. You got that right, boo voodoo. Voodoo, voodoo, hold on. Gravitational waves would throw out timelines. There is no such thing as a gravitational wave. It's as made up a concept as a black hole. How do you like them apples, CCP virus? All right, I don't have much time for many more questions. We are approaching the hour, and we've got so many chats here I haven't gotten to. I apologize. Question: any thoughts on the mark of the beast being a description of the carbon atom? There are lots of things that are coincidental. Like some atom had to have 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons. Hello? Apparently you didn't learn chemistry that well. Ben Davis seems so angry in his live streams. Well, first of all, that's not his name. So if you call him that, I can see why he would get angry. John Boy built, the landfill is the least of his worries. The majority of hardened criminals and an entire town of felons is within 10 miles of the facility, which has no fence. Many of the people are pacifists and probably don't own weapons either, nor do they have any training. Stupidest place in the world. Not a single prepper would move between Pueblo and Canyon City. Ever. After the pole shift, will it be safe to run with scissors? No, Craig, I don't think that is ever safe. Wouldn't it throw off the date by thousands of years just because of a higher carbon-14 content during that event? What event, Jim? That's not a question. It's a loose participle, a phrase that means nothing because it has no noun. Wouldn't what throw off the date? Doug Vogt didn't prescribe to micronova. Not sure where you got that info, but it's not accurate. Oh, yeah? So what was his end of days in 2046? That's the micronova by Doug Vogt. But he called it a supernova. That's the only difference. So, Mr. Mike, tell me what the event in 2046 is that Doug Vogt was calling for. Because clearly you don't know either. Jesus Christ. All right. Got a bunch of experts here that should probably have their own channel. So on that note, we love each and every one of you. I'm glad I got to many of your questions. Be safe. We love you, and we will see you soon. If you're a premium subscriber, we're going to do a personal live stream on StreamYard Sunday noon Mountain Time. Only 2 people showed up out of hundreds of you, and I hope a bunch more show up this Sunday on the StreamYard link that we will provide in the email that I send out in the morning. Be safe. We love you. See if there's any other super chats. Mr. Mike, thank you. And thank you all for showing up for the show. We try to do our best, get to as many questions as possible. Clearly, if you're here early and you dump a question in the first 30 minutes, I can get to it. I've gone through the first 38 minutes worth of questions. Yordi has gifted 5 Magnetic Reversal News memberships. Go gobble them up. I'm sure they're gone by now. And to all of you that showed up, friend Angie, we miss you. Come down to the ranch. Thank you, Derek, for showing up. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for the questions. And, well, thanks for the support in general, because we are at a time where the information that I put down is something that they don't want out there. Be safe. Grow your own food, and that's a boom.